The call of the forest. In the heart of the Sundarbans, where the rivers twist like silver veins through dense mangrove forests, there lay a small, vibrant village called Bishnupur. Known for its peaceful beauty, Bishnupur was a place where people lived in harmony with the land and its creatures. Towering, ancient trees guarded the paths, their roots tangling into each other like elders whispering secrets, while vibrant flora wove itself along the forest floor. The air was rich with the sounds of life. Birds called to one another, the wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, the mighty roar of a tiger echoed, reminding all that this was his domain. The people of Bishnupur, despite their humble lives, held an innate respect for the natural world around them. They were guardians of the forest, careful to preserve its balance while relying on it for their daily needs. The villagers taught their children to respect the animals, especially the royal Bengal tiger, a creature both feared and revered. They called him Bhagwan, a protector and a symbol of the power of the wild. Among the villagers was a 12-year-old girl named Arya. Arya had a boundless curiosity and a heart as wide as the forest itself. With a mane of tangled curls, sunlit skin, and eyes filled with wonder, she was a beloved figure, known for her kindness and deep love for all living things. Arya's parents, both conservationists who had dedicated their lives to preserving the forest and its creatures, had instilled in her the values of compassion and responsibility. From a young age, Arya had shown an unusual connection to animals. Her mother often joked that she was born with the forest in her soul. Birds would perch on her shoulders, and deer would linger near her whenever she visited the outskirts of the village. Arya didn't just see the forest. She felt it as if it were an extension of herself, a sacred place where she belonged. One day, as the village was busy with the usual bustle, Arya felt a strange pull, a whisper, almost, that seemed to come from the depths of the forest. It was like the forest itself was calling her, urging her to venture beyond the familiar paths. Her parents were out, conducting surveys of the local flora, and she knew they would have warned her against wandering too far. But the pull was too strong, too insistent. Something inside her knew that she had to go. The path she took was narrow, barely visible under the canopy of trees that seemed to close in as she walked. She had her small leather satchel with her, packed with a few essentials: a water bottle, a small bundle of rice, and her father's old compass. Her bare feet padded softly against the earth as she moved, her senses alert, every rustle and whisper filling her with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The deeper she went, the quieter the forest became. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath as Arya continued along her path, guided only by instinct. Finally, she came upon a small clearing, bathed in golden sunlight that broke through the dense foliage above. It was here, in the heart of this tranquil space, that she saw something that made her heart stop. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a magnificent royal Bengal tiger. The tiger was massive, his coat a blend of deep orange and black, each stripe seeming to tell a story of strength and survival. His amber eyes held an ancient wisdom, a depth that seemed to pierce through Arya. But what stunned her most was the way the tiger was standing. Instead of assuming an aggressive stance, the tiger had lowered its head, bowing to her in a gesture that felt almost reverential. Arya's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, to find safety, but she couldn't move. Yet oddly, she felt no fear. Instead, a calmness settled over her, a feeling that this was exactly where she was meant to be. As she gazed into the tiger's eyes, a wave of understanding washed over her. She knew, somehow, that the tiger wasn't here to harm her. He was here for something else, something she couldn't yet comprehend. Arya held her breath as the tiger took a cautious step forward, bowing his head once more, his massive frame seeming to diminish under the weight of some unseen burden. "Arya, Arya," a voice called from the distance. It was her friend, Samir, who had followed her, concerned about her sudden disappearance. Startled by the sound, the tiger took a step back, his eyes narrowing slightly. Arya felt a pang of loss as he retreated, but she remained still, as if by some silent agreement between them. "Did you see that?" Samir's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. Arya nodded, her gaze still fixed on the retreating figure of the tiger. "I don't know why, but I feel like he needs something. Like he's asking for help." "Are you sure?" "It's a tiger, Arya. What if it's, I don't know, just trying to trick us?" "I don't think animals work like that," she murmured, her mind whirling. "It's more than that. There's something wrong. I can feel it." As they made their way back to the village, Arya's heart was a storm of emotions. She couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with the tiger was more than a chance meeting. The villagers had always spoken of tigers with reverence, almost as if they were spirits of the forest. Could it be that this tiger needed her help? News of Arya's encounter spread quickly through the village. Elders, usually calm and steady, looked at her with a mix of wonder and concern. The villagers gathered around her, murmuring to one another, their faces etched with worry. None could remember a time when a tiger had bowed to a human, especially not a child. It was unprecedented, a sign that something was amiss. Arya, her father, Rajan, spoke gravely. "This is no small matter. If the tiger has reached out to you, then we must understand why. The forest is not just our home. It is the home of every creature within it. We owe it to them to listen." Her mother, a renowned biologist, agreed. "The forest is sending us a message. We need to pay attention." Over the following days, the villagers kept a close eye on the forest, and Arya found herself drawn to the clearing where she had first seen the tiger. She visited the spot every day, hoping he would return. Each time, she sat quietly, her heart open, her senses attuned to the forest around her. Samir and a few others accompanied her, though they kept a respectful distance, watching her from the shadows. Then, one evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of twilight, Arya felt the familiar pull once more. She glanced around, and there he was, the tiger, standing on the edge of the clearing, his eyes fixed on her with a mixture of urgency and pain. Slowly he approached, and Arya noticed something she hadn't seen before. The tiger's front paw was swollen, a raw wound festering just below the surface. Her heart clenched as she realized the source of his pain. She watched as he lowered himself to the ground, his head bowing once more in a gesture of trust. Arya moved slowly, her heart pounding, but this time it was not from fear. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she reached out to inspect the wound. The tiger remained still, his breathing heavy but steady. She knew she couldn't do much on her own, but she also knew that this moment was sacred, a bond forged in pain, in trust, in the silent understanding that they were both children of the forest, connected by something far greater than themselves. She would help him, whatever it took. The healer's touch. As the moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, illuminating the clearing with a soft, ethereal glow, Arya sat beside the injured tiger, her fingers tracing the edges of his wound with care. The tiger, in turn, remained utterly still, his massive form relaxed despite the obvious discomfort in his swollen paw. His trust filled Arya with an unexpected sense of purpose. She understood that her calling was now entwined with the forest and its creatures, just as surely as the roots of the mangroves bound the land and water together. "I need to help him, but I can't do it alone," Arya whispered, half to herself, half to the tiger, who gazed at her with eyes as deep as the forest. With a reluctant sigh, she pulled back and rose to her feet. She would have to return to the village for supplies and enlist the help of her parents. As she turned to leave, the tiger let out a soft, rumbling growl, a sound that vibrated in her chest, a call, almost pleading. She reached out and laid her hand gently on his head, brushing his fur in a gesture of comfort. "I'll be back, I promise," she said, hoping he understood. Arya sprinted through the forest, her mind racing as she dodged roots and twisted branches. The familiar shadows of the trees stretched across her path, guiding her back to the village as if the forest itself knew her mission. When she finally emerged from the dense foliage and into the village, her father was waiting, worry etched into his face. "Aria," he exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "Where have you been?" "Papa." Aria gasped, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The tiger? He's hurt. His paw is infected. I need supplies, maybe some medicine." Her father's expression softened from concern to understanding. "Let's get your mother. We'll need her expertise." They hurried to her mother's small laboratory, a modest hut filled with jars of herbs, bandages, and an assortment of tools for treating the ailments of both humans and animals. Dr. Anjali was busy, inspecting a collection of medicinal plants, when they entered. Aria quickly explained what she had seen, her voice urgent and pleading. Her mother listened, her face a mix of intrigue and pride. "This tiger," she began, selecting a small wooden box filled with salves and herbs, "trusts you, Aria. That's a gift as rare as it is powerful." Within minutes, the family was ready. Aria's mother packed a selection of healing herbs, a sterilizing salve, and a few homemade bandages, and her father gathered a small group of trusted villagers, each carrying torches and protective sticks, not to harm, but to be prepared should other animals be drawn to the scent of blood. Together, they set off into the dark forest, following Aria's sure-footed path. When they reached the clearing, the tiger was still there, lying under the dappled moonlight, his breathing steady. The villagers halted a few feet away, cautious but in awe of the sight before them. None of them had ever seen a tiger up close, and here was the most majestic creature of the Sundarbans, lying vulnerable yet trusting. Aria approached him slowly, her hands raised in a gesture of calm. "It's okay, Bhagwan. These are my parents. They're here to help," she murmured. The tiger watched, his golden eyes flickering in the torchlight. Aria could sense his apprehension, but she kept her gaze soft and her movements gentle. Her mother knelt beside her, reaching out with a salve-covered cloth. "This might sting," Dr. Anjali warned quietly. With delicate care, she began to clean the wound, her hands steady and practiced. The tiger winced, a low growl vibrating from his throat, but Aria continued to whisper soothing words, stroking his fur with a calming rhythm. Her father and the villagers watched in awe as the powerful animal allowed these humans, usually his prey, to tend to his injury. As her mother worked, she instructed Aria on each step. "This plant is called neem. It has strong antibacterial properties," she said, pressing the paste into the wound. "The infection must have been causing him immense pain." Aria nodded, absorbing each detail. She felt a surge of gratitude toward her parents, who had taught her to treat nature's creatures with respect, whether small or large, predator or prey. Once the wound was cleaned and the salve applied, her mother bandaged it carefully, ensuring it was snug but not too tight. As the treatment came to an end, the tiger's eyes softened, his body relaxing visibly. The tension in the air dissipated, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude that seemed to flow between the humans and the tiger. "Thank you, Aria," Dr. Anjali whispered, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Tonight, you've shown bravery beyond your years." The group began to gather their things, ready to head back to the village, but Aria lingered. She turned back to the tiger, who was watching her intently, his gaze almost protective. "We'll visit every day," she promised, "until you're strong again." For the next several days, Aria and her family returned to the clearing, sometimes alone, sometimes with her friends, and each time they brought fresh supplies to tend to the tiger's wound. As his health improved, so did his spirits. He greeted Aria each day with a soft rumble, and as she approached, he would bow his head in a gesture of trust and gratitude that made Aria's heart swell with a strange joy. The tiger's visits soon became a common sight, and the villagers began to see him less as a fearsome predator and more as a member of their community, a wild but sacred presence who had chosen Aria as his protector. During these visits, Aria's friends began to join her, curious yet wary. Samir, who had been there during her first encounter, was especially eager to see the tiger up close. "Are you sure he's safe, Arya?" Samir asked one morning, his voice trembling with excitement and apprehension. "I think he is, as long as we respect him," Arya replied. She gently patted the tiger's head, and he responded by pressing his head lightly into her hand. "He's been hurt, and now he's healing. He knows we're helping him." As they sat beside the tiger, Arya began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. His once constant watchfulness began to soften, replaced by a calm that seemed to deepen each day. He would close his eyes and let out a deep, contented sigh whenever Arya tended to him, as if the forest itself was pouring its strength back into his wounded body. One evening, as they were preparing to leave the clearing, Arya's mother knelt down beside her and spoke in a soft voice. "You know, Arya, this bond you share with him is extraordinary. He sees you as a friend, perhaps even a protector." Arya nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "I think he's more than just a tiger, Mama. It's like he's a part of the forest itself." Dr. Anjali placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And so are you, my dear. You have the heart of a healer, a true friend to all who dwell here." As the tiger continued to heal, Arya felt her connection to him deepen. She sensed his gratitude, his strength, and his wisdom as if they were threads woven into the very fabric of her soul. Each day, she learned more about the delicate balance of the forest, about patience, courage, and compassion. The villagers, too, began to notice the shift. The tiger had become a symbol of their unity, a reminder that they were guardians not just of the land but of every creature who called it home. On the last evening of the healing journey, as the tiger stood tall, his golden eyes full of vitality, he turned to Arya one final time and lowered his head in a profound bow. It was a gesture of honor, a tribute to the young girl who had crossed the boundaries between human and beast, who had seen him not as a threat but as a life worth saving. With a last, lingering gaze, the tiger padded off into the shadows, his form merging with the forest. Arya watched him go, a mixture of pride and sadness in her heart. She knew he would return when the time was right, that their bond was not one of mere circumstance but of destiny. As she made her way back to the village that night, Arya felt a sense of peace settle over her. The tiger had given her something precious, something words could not capture. And though he was gone for now, she knew that he would always be a part of her, just as she was a part of the forest, a silent promise, sealed in moonlight and bound by the ancient, timeless magic of the wild. The secrets of the forest. Weeks passed since the tiger's departure, yet his presence lingered in Arya's heart like an ember that refused to fade. Every evening, as the sky turned from soft pink to deep indigo, she would find herself gazing toward the forest, half expecting to see his silhouette, golden eyes glinting in the shadows. The village of Bishnupur buzzed with tales of her encounters with the tiger. Elders spoke in hushed tones about the ancient bond she seemed to share with the creature, calling it a soul link that defied explanation. But to Arya, it felt natural, an extension of her connection to the land. Then, one evening, as the village settled into its nightly routine, Arya was startled by a sound, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to roll through the air like distant thunder. She froze, listening intently. The sound was familiar, unmistakable. Her pulse quickened as she recognized it. The tiger was calling her. Arya barely took the time to grab her satchel before she was running through the village and toward the forest. Her parents had learned to trust her instincts, and although they worried, they respected the bond she shared with the wild. As she slipped into the dense cover of trees, she felt a sense of purpose well up inside her, pulling her deeper into the shadows. The tiger was waiting in the clearing where they had first met. His majestic form appeared even more powerful than before, his eyes glowing like embers. But there was something different about him now, a flicker of urgency, a need she could feel even from a distance. He was no longer the injured creature she had tended to. He was strong again, yet he had come back. For her. Slowly, Arya approached, sensing that this was not a simple visit. She knelt before him, and he met her gaze, his amber eyes filled with something deeper than words. It was as if he was speaking to her in a language only her heart could understand. "What is it, Bhagwan?" Arya whispered, using the name the villagers had given him. "What do you need me to see?" The tiger gave a soft huff, turning his head toward the forest, his gaze fixed on a distant point hidden by dense foliage. He took a step forward, then glanced back, waiting. Arya felt a shiver of anticipation as she realized what he wanted. He was inviting her to follow him, to venture deeper into the forest than she had ever dared to go. Without hesitation, she nodded, understanding the weight of his silent request. The tiger turned, moving with fluid grace through the underbrush, and Arya followed, her heart racing as they left the familiar paths behind. The forest grew denser, the air thick with the earthy scent of moss and damp leaves. Branches closed in around them, forming an almost sacred tunnel, as if the forest itself was sheltering them from the outside world. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the only sounds the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. The light grew dim, filtered through the dense canopy, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and shift with each step. Arya's sense of time and space faded, replaced by a heightened awareness of the forest's pulse, the rhythm of life that coursed through every root and leaf. Finally, they reached a clearing unlike any she had seen before. Massive ancient trees stood in a circle, their roots coiled like guardians protecting a sacred space. In the center lay a small, pristine pool, its surface so clear it mirrored the night sky above. Arya's breath caught as she took in the beauty of the place. It felt otherworldly, a hidden sanctuary untouched by human hands. The tiger stepped into the clearing, padding softly toward the pool. He paused at the edge, lowering his head to drink, and Arya followed, mesmerized by the stillness. She knelt beside him, her fingers trailing through the water, cool and pure, as if drawn from the heart of the earth itself. As she gazed into the water, something caught her eye, a faint shimmer, almost like a reflection. But when she looked up, there was nothing there. Intrigued, she looked back down, and this time the image was clearer. It was her own face, but there was something different about it, a brightness in her eyes, an aura of strength she had never noticed before. And behind her, barely visible in the reflection, was the faint outline of the tiger, as if they were two parts of the same whole. A sudden feeling of understanding washed over her, as if the forest itself was whispering secrets into her mind. She felt a strange sense of awakening, a knowledge that ran deeper than memory. She was part of something ancient, something sacred. This bond with the tiger was not a mere coincidence. It was a destiny woven into the fabric of the forest. The tiger raised his head, his gaze meeting hers in the water. In that moment, Arya understood. He had brought her here to show her the hidden heart of the forest, a place of power and mystery. She was not just a visitor here. She was a guardian, entrusted with a responsibility that transcended her years. As they sat in silence, the air around them seemed to thicken, charged with energy. The forest was alive, watching, and Arya felt its gaze upon her, a silent call that resonated deep within her soul. Just then, a faint sound reached her ears, a distant cry, high and mournful, echoing through the trees. The tiger's ears perked up, and he rose to his feet, his muscles tensed as if ready to spring into action. Arya felt a shiver of apprehension. She recognized that cry. It was the sound of a young animal in distress. The tiger glanced at her, his eyes filled with urgency, and without a word, he turned and sprinted into the trees, his powerful form disappearing into the shadows. Arya scrambled to her feet and followed, her heart pounding as she raced after him. She knew that the tiger was leading her toward something important, something that would change her forever. They ran through the forest, weaving between trees and leaping over roots, until finally they'd reached another clearing. There, huddled in the shadows, was a tiny tiger cub, its fur matted and its eyes wide with fear. It looked up at them, letting out a pitiful mewl, and Aria's heart clenched as she saw the desperation in its gaze. The tiger approached the cub, nuzzling it gently, and the cub responded with a soft purr, pressing close to him. Aria watched in awe, realizing that the cub was his offspring, perhaps the reason he had sought her help in the first place. He had not only needed healing for himself but protection for his family. As Aria approached, the cub looked up at her, its small, fragile form trembling. She knelt beside it, extending her hand slowly. The cub hesitated, then took a tentative step forward, its nose brushing against her fingers. A sense of warmth and wonder filled her as she stroked its fur, feeling the tiny heartbeat beneath her hand. The tiger looked at her, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He trusted her, not just with his life, but with the life of his cub. It was a responsibility that filled her with both pride and humility. She knew that she would do everything in her power to protect them. With careful movements, Aria scooped the cub into her arms, cradling it against her chest. The cub nestled into her, letting out a soft sigh, and Aria felt a surge of love that transcended words. This tiny creature, so vulnerable and innocent, had been entrusted to her, a guardian not just of the forest, but of life itself. Together, they made their way back to the hidden pool, where the cub settled beside the water, drinking eagerly. The tiger watched over them, his gaze calm and protective, as if satisfied that his family was now safe. As the night deepened, Aria realized that her life had changed irrevocably. She was no longer just a young girl with a love for animals. She was a protector, a part of the forest's very soul. The bond she shared with the tiger was not merely a friendship. It was a covenant, a promise to safeguard the forest and its creatures. When they returned to the village the next morning, the villagers gasped in awe at the sight of Aria carrying the tiger cub, with the great tiger walking at her side like a shadow. Her parents rushed to her, their faces a mixture of astonishment and pride. Aria explained what had happened, the hidden pool, the bond she had forged, and the responsibility she now felt. The villagers gathered around, listening in awe, and when she finished, an elder stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have the spirit of a protector, Aria. The forest has chosen you, and we are honored to stand beside you." From that day forward, Aria became more than just a child of the village. She was the guardian of the forest, the protector of its secrets, and the keeper of its life. And though the tiger eventually returned to his world of shadows and moonlight, Aria knew that he was never far, watching over her just as she watched over him. The forest had given her its trust, its strength, and its wisdom. And she, in turn, would give it her heart, a forest under threat. As the seasons turned, Aria's connection with the forest grew deeper, her role as a guardian becoming more significant with each passing day. She spent every moment she could among the trees, watching over the tiger cub she had named Kala for his inky black stripes. Kala was thriving under her care, growing stronger and more playful, his bond with Aria as close as that of siblings. The great tiger, Bhagwan, had returned to his realm within the forest, but Aria sensed he was never far, like a silent protector who guarded the boundaries of their world. Vishnupur's villagers had come to respect Aria's bond with the tiger family. Some even saw it as a blessing, a sign that the forest spirits favored their community. They would often leave small offerings at the edge of the trees, a bowl of milk, wildflowers, and sometimes a piece of sweet jaggery, meant as tokens of gratitude for the tiger and the protection he represented. One late summer afternoon, however, a disturbance rippled through the peaceful harmony of Vishnupur. Aria was tending to Kala near the hidden pool when she heard the distant, jarring sound of engines, a deep rumbling noise that echoed through the trees and sent a shiver of unease through her. Kala's ears perked up, his playful energy turning to tension as he glanced nervously toward the direction of the sound. "What could that be?" Aria murmured, sensing Kala's fear. The noise grew louder, filling the air with a discordant hum that clashed with the usual tranquility of the forest. Arya rose, her heart pounding as she picked Kala up in her arms, holding him close as she made her way back to the village. When she arrived, she found the villagers gathered in worried clusters, their faces shadowed with concern. Arya, her mother called, rushing to her side. Something's happening in the forest. There are men with machines. Arya's father, Rajan, joined them, his face set with determination. It's a construction crew. They claim to have permits to build a road through the forest. A surge of panic rose within Arya. A road cutting through the forest would disrupt the delicate balance of life, destroying habitats, disturbing animal corridors, and, worst of all, bringing more human presence into this sacred land. The thought of Kala, Bhagwan, and the countless other creatures losing their homes made her chest tighten. "We have to stop them, Papa," Arya exclaimed, her eyes fierce with resolve. "The forest can't survive this." Rajan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know, Arya, but they have papers, permits from officials. They're not breaking any laws, at least not according to the government. But they don't understand." Arya's voice trembled with urgency. "The forest isn't just trees and animals. It's alive, Papa. It's a spirit, and it trusts us. If we betray it, we'll lose something we can never get back." Her mother nodded in agreement. "Your father's right, Arya. We need to show them what's at stake. They see the forest as an obstacle, a piece of land. We need to make them see it for what it really is. A sanctuary, a home for countless lives, a heritage that belongs to all of us." Over the next few days, the villagers of Bishnupur organized, holding meetings, gathering information, and petitioning to halt the construction. They approached the officials with pleas and documents, attempting to explain the ecological importance of the forest and its role in their cultural heritage. Arya's parents spearheaded the efforts, using their knowledge as conservationists to strengthen the argument. But each visit to the government offices left them frustrated, their concerns dismissed as sentimental rather than scientific. The construction company, backed by influential investors, was determined to complete the road. It was a lucrative project, they claimed, promising better access and trade routes for the region. The forest, they argued, could be replaced, replanted elsewhere, but the road was progress. Arya's spirit, however, was undaunted. She visited the hidden pool every day, sometimes with Kala at her side, sometimes alone, seeking guidance from the forest, hoping for a way to protect it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat by the water, her fingers trailing through its surface as she whispered her fears into the stillness. As if in answer, a faint rustle came from the shadows. Arya looked up to see Bhagwan, the great tiger, emerging from the trees, his eyes gleaming in the twilight. He moved with a silent, powerful grace, coming to stand beside her at the edge of the pool. Kala ran to his father, nuzzling him with joy, and the sight of the two tigers together filled Arya with renewed determination. "They're trying to take your home," she murmured to Bhagwan, meeting his steady gaze. "Our home, but I won't let them." In that moment, an idea sparked in Arya's mind, one that was daring, perhaps even reckless, but it felt right. She would take the fight beyond the boundaries of Bishnupur, beyond the village and the forest. She would make sure the world knew what was at stake. With her parents' reluctant blessing, Arya began to document the forest's beauty and the creatures that called it home. She took her family's old camera, trekking through the mangroves to capture images of the forest's life. The colorful birds that nested high in the trees, the families of deer grazing in the shade, the delicate flowers that bloomed on the forest floor. And of course, she captured images of Bhagwan and Kala, their forms blending into the dappled sunlight, a testament to the wild spirit of the Sundarbans. At night, she wrote letters to environmental organizations, wildlife activists, and anyone she thought might help. She included photographs, heartfelt words about the forest's importance, and stories of her encounters with Bhagwan and Kala. She described the hidden pool, the ancient trees, and the way the forest seemed to breathe, to pulse with life. The response was slow at first, but gradually her letters found their way into the hands of people who cared. One day, her family received a call from a renowned wildlife conservation organization. They had been moved by Aria's words and wanted to know more. Soon, journalists arrived in Bishnupur, eager to see the forest and hear Aria's story. They followed her into the forest, witnessing the beauty she had captured, and they were captivated by the sight of Bhagwan and Kala, the bond between girl and tiger that seemed to defy reason. News articles, videos, and photos flooded social media, sparking a global outcry. The story of Aria, the young girl protecting her forest and her tiger family, resonated with people around the world. Petitions sprang up, gathering thousands of signatures, demanding that the construction be stopped. But even as the world rallied behind her, the threat loomed closer. The construction company, backed by powerful interests, was not easily swayed. They claimed the village's protests were misguided, an obstruction to progress. Undeterred, Aria continued to fight, her resolve unbreakable. She knew the forest was more than a piece of land. It was a living entity, a guardian of countless lives, a sanctuary that had sheltered and protected generations. Then, one evening, as Aria sat by the hidden pool, she heard a commotion in the distance. The sound of engines, closer than ever, rumbled through the forest, accompanied by the sharp crack of trees falling. Fear shot through her, her heart pounding as she realized the machines were already advancing. Bhagwan appeared beside her, his powerful form tense, his eyes narrowed with a fierce protectiveness. Kala, sensing the urgency, let out a low growl, his small frame shivering with anger. In that moment, Aria made a choice. She couldn't simply watch as the forest fell. She would make a stand, here and now. She stood, her heart racing, and walked toward the sound of the machines, Bhagwan and Kala at her side like shadows of the forest spirit. When she reached the construction site, the workers froze at the sight of her, flanked by the two tigers, their eyes fierce and unyielding. A hush fell over the crowd as Aria raised her voice, her words clear and strong. "This forest isn't just trees and dirt," she declared. "It's a living, breathing world. It's a home to all of us, humans and animals alike. If you destroy it, you destroy a piece of all of us. You destroy hope." The workers exchanged uneasy glances, some looking at Bhagwan with a mix of fear and awe. The foreman, a burly man with a hard expression, stepped forward, unimpressed. "This is our job, little girl. We have orders." Aria lifted her chin, her gaze unwavering. "I know that, but some things are worth more than orders. This forest is sacred. It's a sanctuary, and I won't let you destroy it." A tense silence fell as Aria and the foreman faced each other, the villagers watching with bated breath. Just then, the sound of voices reached them, voices of activists, journalists, and supporters who had come to witness the forest's plight. "Listen to her," one of the activists called, stepping forward. "She speaks for all of us who care about this planet." The foreman's gaze flickered, uncertain. Aria sensed the tide shifting, a growing force behind her as the crowd began to chant, demanding an end to the destruction. The pressure mounted, and finally, with a reluctant sigh, the foreman ordered his men to stop. The machines fell silent, their engines stilling, and Aria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Relief washed over her, mingling with a fierce pride. The forest had been saved for now. In the days that followed, the construction project was put on indefinite hold, with environmental organizations stepping in to negotiate a formal protection status for the forest. Aria's actions had ignited a movement, drawing attention to the importance of preserving the natural world and respecting the delicate balance between human progress and nature's needs. And though the forest still faced challenges, Aria knew they had won a powerful victory. She returned to the hidden pool, where Bhagwan and Kala waited, their eyes warm with silent gratitude. The forest had recognized her as its guardian, and she had answered its call. In the stillness of that sacred place, Arya made a promise, a vow to protect the forest, to defend its spirit and its life. She knew that as long as she breathed, the forest would never be alone. It was her home, her heart, and her destiny. A guardian's burden. In the weeks following Arya's victory over the construction company, Bishnupur became a symbol of resilience, a beacon for communities fighting to protect their land and heritage. Arya's story spread far and wide, drawing activists, conservationists, and even government officials to the small village to see the forest she had saved and to understand the bond she shared with its creatures. But for Arya, this newfound attention was not the end. It was only the beginning. The burden of being the forest's guardian weighed heavily on her young shoulders. She had won a battle, yes, but she understood the war for the forest was far from over. Every day, as she walked through the ancient trees with Kala at her side, she could feel the silent expectation, the watchful gaze of the forest. It trusted her, but it also demanded more of her. Protecting this world meant constant vigilance, a commitment that went beyond a single act of defiance. One evening, as the sun cast long, golden shadows across the village, Arya sat with her parents, discussing the future of the forest. "The attention we've brought is a good start," her father said, pride and worry mingling in his voice. "But it's not enough. Companies and governments don't just back down because of one protest. They'll wait until the attention dies down, and then they'll try again." Her mother nodded in agreement, her face thoughtful. "They see the forest as land, Arya. They don't understand its spirit, its life. To them, it's an asset waiting to be developed. If we want to protect it permanently, we need to show them that this forest is beyond value, that it's irreplaceable." "But how?" Arya asked, frustration edging into her voice. "I've shown them Bhagwan, Kala, the beauty of the forest. But they see only trees and animals, things they think can be replaced. How can we make them see what we see?" Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's not just about showing them, Arya. It's about connecting them. We have to help them feel the forest the way you do. That's the only way they'll understand." Arya thought deeply about her mother's words, considering the task before her. She knew that to truly protect the forest, she would have to find a way to convey its spirit to the world, to awaken a sense of guardianship in others, just as it had awakened within her. As she mulled over her thoughts, a new idea began to take shape. It was daring, ambitious, perhaps even impossible. But if she succeeded, it could ensure the forest's protection for generations to come. She would have to gather allies, people from all walks of life, to come and witness the forest, to feel its beauty and mystery, and to understand why it deserved to remain untouched. The very next morning, Arya set her plan into motion. She reached out to the activists, conservationists, and supporters who had rallied behind her during the protest. She invited them to Bishnupur, not just to visit the forest, but to experience it on a deeper level, to see it through her eyes, to walk its paths, listen to its silence, and feel its ancient pulse. Over the following weeks, people from across the country arrived, curious and eager. Bishnupur's villagers welcomed them warmly, offering food and shelter to the visitors who came with cameras, notebooks, and open hearts. Arya guided each group personally, taking them to the hidden pool, introducing them to Kala, and showing them the towering trees and winding riverbanks. But she did more than that. She shared the stories of the forest, tales the villagers had passed down for generations, stories that spoke of the forest spirits, the bond between humans and nature, and the lessons the land had taught them. As the visitors listened, they began to feel the forest's soul. They saw it not as a resource but as a living entity, a home with its own wisdom and heartbeat. Some cried as they listened to Arya's stories, moved by her words and the deep love she felt for this land. Others marveled at Kala, who now walked proudly beside her, his fur gleaming in the sunlight as he explored his home with youthful curiosity. But even as Arya worked tirelessly to spread her message, she knew that not everyone would be moved. Some saw the beauty but remained unmoved, skeptical of what they called sentimentality. One visitor in particular, a wealthy businessman who had come on behalf of the construction company, watched her tours with a detached, almost dismissive interest. He listened politely, took a few notes, but his eyes never softened, his stance never relaxed. One afternoon, as Arya led a small group to the edge of the forest, she noticed him standing apart, watching Kala with a hint of distaste. He turned to Arya, his voice carrying a note of challenge. "Do you really believe that saving this forest is worth all this effort?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "After all, it's just a small patch of land in a much larger world. We have other forests, don't we?" Arya felt a surge of anger rise in her chest, but she held it in check, meeting his gaze steadily. "This forest is more than land," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "It's a sanctuary, a guardian of life, a place that teaches us respect and patience. You may see it as just trees and animals, but to us, it's home. It's a part of who we are." The businessman sighed, shaking his head. "It's a nice sentiment, but progress requires sacrifices. Roads, factories, those are the things that drive our future. Your forest may be beautiful, but beauty doesn't put food on the table or fuel the economy." Arya took a step closer, her gaze unyielding. "And when there are no forests left, when every wild place has been sacrificed in the name of progress, what kind of future will that be?" The man looked away, an uncomfortable silence stretching between them. He muttered something about idealism and walked off, leaving Arya standing alone, frustration simmering within her. But that evening, as she sat by the hidden pool with Kala at her side, Arya felt the forest soothe her anger, filling her with a quiet resolve. She knew she couldn't change everyone's mind, but she could keep fighting, keep protecting. The forest had entrusted her with its secrets, its beauty, and its life, and she would honor that trust, no matter the cost. Over the following months, Arya continued to fight, her days filled with guiding visitors, giving talks, and sharing her stories. Her words and actions inspired many, and slowly a movement began to take shape, one that stretched beyond Bishnupur and into neighboring villages, towns, and cities. People began to speak out, demanding stronger protections for the forest, calling for laws that would prevent its destruction. Environmental organizations joined the cause, using Arya's story as a rallying cry for preserving wild places everywhere. One day, a surprise visitor arrived in Bishnupur. It was a government official, sent by the Ministry of Environment. He had heard of Arya's efforts and had come to see the forest for himself. Arya led him through the trees, showing him the hidden pool, the towering mangroves, and the wildlife that thrived within. She spoke of Bhagwan and Kala, of the trust the forest had placed in her, and of her vow to protect it. The official listened, visibly moved by her passion. When they reached the hidden pool, he knelt down, his fingers skimming the water as he looked around in wonder. "This place, it's unlike anything I've ever seen," he murmured, almost to himself. He turned to Arya, a hint of respect in his eyes. "I see now why you fight so hard. You've shown me something I couldn't understand before." When he returned to the city, he presented a proposal to the government, a plan to designate the Sundarbans as a protected area, a sanctuary where no development or construction could take place. The proposal was met with resistance, but public support was overwhelming, bolstered by Arya's story and the tireless efforts of her allies. Finally, after months of lobbying, petitions, and protests, the government made its decision. The Sundarbans, including Arya's forest, was declared a protected sanctuary, its boundaries safe from human encroachment. Bishnupur celebrated, the villagers rejoicing in their hard-won victory. They honored Arya, the young girl who had risked everything to protect their home, who had reminded them of the strength of love and the power of a single voice. As the celebrations died down and the village returned to its quiet rhythm, Arya found herself by the hidden pool once more. Bhagwan stood beside her, his powerful form a silent testament to the strength of the forest, while Kala, now a strong young tiger, played nearby, his movements graceful and full of life. Arya knelt by the water, her reflection mingling with that of the two tigers. She had fought, sacrificed, and endured heartbreak to protect this land. She had learned that being a guardian was a burden, but one she would carry proudly, for the forest was a part of her now, bound to her spirit as surely as the trees were bound to the earth. As she sat with her tiger family, she felt a peace settle within her, a quiet joy that came from knowing she had honored the forest's trust. She was its guardian, and she always would be. And as long as she breathed, she would keep it safe, for this forest, this wild sanctuary, was not just her responsibility, it was her legacy. Legacy of the wild. Years passed, and the village of Bishnupur thrived under the canopy of its beloved forest. The once sleepy village had become a destination for naturalists, conservationists, and travelers who came to learn about the ancient mangroves and to witness the legacy of a young girl who had fought to protect it. Bishnupur became known as a forest sanctuary village, a place where people lived in harmony with nature, each villager a guardian in their own right. Arya had grown into a young woman, wise beyond her years, with a quiet strength that had been shaped by the forest. The villagers still remembered the fearless 12-year-old who had stood against powerful forces to save the forest. But Arya herself knew that the true challenge had only begun with that first victory. Protecting the forest meant vigilance, advocacy, and education. Her days were filled with leading groups of visitors through the forest, sharing stories of its inhabitants, and reminding each new listener of the sanctity of the land. Bhagwan, the great tiger, was a familiar presence, often spotted moving silently among the trees, his watchful eyes a reminder of the forest's fierce spirit. Kala, now a fully grown tiger, had assumed his role as protector, patrolling his territory with grace and authority. Together, they represented the ancient power of the forest, a living testament to the strength that came from nature's wild heart. One bright morning, Arya was preparing for a gathering at the village center. A group of environmental scientists, along with reporters and government officials, had arrived to discuss the possibility of establishing a series of educational programs in Bishnupur. These programs would allow students from across the country to experience the forest, to learn its lessons, and ideally, to carry its wisdom back to their own communities. As Arya moved among the guests, greeting each one warmly, she sensed a familiar presence. Turning, she saw Bhagwan and Kala standing at the forest's edge, watching her. A quiet smile spread across her face as she nodded in their direction. It felt as though they, too, were welcoming the visitors, approving of her efforts to protect and share their home. The discussions at the village center were animated, filled with passionate exchanges about conservation, environmental responsibility, and the role of education in shaping future generations. As the day stretched into afternoon, Arya led the group on a tour through the forest, sharing stories of its history, its resilience, and its interconnectedness. She spoke of the forest's inhabitants, the birds, the deer, the elephants that occasionally wandered near the village, and, of course, the tigers who had become its guardians. The officials listened intently, their expressions softening as Arya described the life she had led among the trees. For some, it was the first time they truly understood the forest as a living entity, a world that thrived in a delicate balance, each creature an essential part of the whole. When they reached the hidden pool, Arya paused, letting the group take in the beauty of the place. The water reflected the sky like a mirror, the surrounding trees standing like ancient sentinels, silent witnesses to the forest's secrets. As they gathered around, one of the scientists, a woman with graying hair and keen, intelligent eyes, stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Arya. "This place is sacred, isn't it?" the woman asked, her voice soft. Arya nodded. "Yes, it is. It's where I first realized that the forest had chosen me to protect it. And it's where I made my promise to honor its trust and to keep it safe, no matter what." The woman smiled, a deep warmth in her expression. "Then perhaps we, too, should make a promise," she said, turning to the group. "This forest has been a guardian of life for centuries. It's time we become guardians in return." One by one, the visitors nodded, moved by the beauty and the sense of responsibility Aria had instilled in them. They pledged to support her work, to advocate for stronger environmental protections, and to share what they had learned with their communities. The forest's legacy would spread far beyond Bishnupur, its influence reaching cities and towns across the country. But even as Aria celebrated these new allies, she knew her work was far from over. The forest faced threats from afar: climate change, illegal poaching, pollution, all forces that could disrupt the delicate ecosystem she had fought so hard to protect. She decided to establish a conservation center in Bishnupur, a place where young people from around the world could come to learn about wildlife preservation and sustainable living. She wanted them to feel the connection she felt, to understand that the earth was not something to be conquered, but something to be nurtured. The conservation center was built on the outskirts of the village, designed to blend seamlessly into the landscape. The buildings were constructed from sustainable materials, with open spaces that allowed students to feel immersed in the forest even while indoors. The center offered programs on wildlife biology, environmental science, and indigenous wisdom, each course rooted in the understanding that humans were a part of nature, not above it. Aria took great care in designing the curriculum, drawing on her own experiences and the stories of the villagers. Elders taught classes on traditional knowledge, sharing the ancient wisdom that had allowed Bishnupur's people to live in harmony with the land. Scientists led workshops on conservation techniques, while artists and writers encouraged students to express their experiences through storytelling, painting, and poetry. Over time, the Conservation Center became a beacon for those seeking a deeper understanding of the natural world. Students arrived from all over the world, each one eager to learn from the forest and to carry its teachings back to their own homes. They explored the hidden pool, observed Kala from a respectful distance, and marveled at the symphony of life that thrived within the mangroves. As the years passed, Aria watched the young people who came to the center blossom into passionate advocates for the environment. She saw them return as adults, bringing their own children to the forest, eager to share the beauty and wisdom they had found here. Vishnupur's legacy grew, woven into the hearts of those who had been touched by its magic. One autumn, as the air grew crisp and the leaves turned shades of gold and crimson, Aria walked to the hidden pool alone. She had just celebrated her 32nd birthday, a milestone that felt both humbling and surreal. She had spent 2 decades as the forest's guardian, and though she had aged, the forest itself seemed timeless, each tree as steadfast and strong as it had been in her youth. As she knelt by the water, she caught her reflection, a woman with gentle lines etched into her face, her hair streaked with hints of silver, but her eyes as bright and full of wonder as they had been at 12. She saw herself, but she also saw the forest reflected in her gaze, its wildness and resilience a part of her very soul. A soft rustle drew her attention, and she looked up to see Bhagwan stepping out from the trees, his powerful form as regal as ever. Though his fur was tinged with silver and his movements slower, his presence remained as awe-inspiring as when she had first met him. Behind him, Kala padded forward, his own form now imposing, his coat sleek, and his eyes sharp. And, to Aria's delight, by Kala's side were 2 tiger cubs, their small bodies filled with the boundless energy of youth. The sight filled Aria's heart with a profound joy. Bhagwan had passed his legacy to Kala, who in turn was raising the next generation. The forest was alive with continuity, each life a testament to the strength and endurance of nature. As she watched the cubs play, Aria felt a sense of peace settle over her. She knew that when her time as guardian came to an end, the forest would continue, its life unfurling in endless cycles. She, too, was part of that cycle, a single thread woven into the vast tapestry of the wild. With a quiet smile, she reached into her satchel, pulling out a small hand-bound journal. She had kept it since her youth, filling its pages with notes, sketches, and memories of her time in the forest. She had written of her first encounter with Bhagwan, of her journey to save the forest, and of the people who had joined her along the way. She had recorded the wisdom she had learned, the beauty she had seen, and the lessons she hoped others would carry forward. As she placed the journal by the edge of the pool, a sense of completion washed over her. This was her legacy, a gift for the forest, and for those who would come after her. She knew the forest would guard it, just as it had guarded her. With one last look at the forest, the tigers, and the hidden pool, Arya turned and began her walk back to the village, her steps light and her heart full. She knew that the forest would endure, that its spirit would live on in each new guardian, each visitor, each life touched by its beauty. And as long as the forest lived, so would her story, a story of courage, love, and an unbreakable bond with the wild. The villagers of Bishnupur watched her return, and though she was now a woman with wisdom etched into her soul, they saw the same spark, the same fierce love that had driven her as a child. She was, and always would be, their guardian of the forest, a protector, a teacher, a legacy bound forever to the land she loved.